The majority of people who come visit my channel, they're fans of games like Chivalry 2 or Mordhau, medieval slasher games, big chaotic battles, high skill swordplay. But the thing is with this genre is it takes a few years for us to get a good entry, right? It seems like every 3 to 5 years we get a new game. There's not too much out there. There's been a lot of games in development over the last few years, but as with anything indie, when they will release, if they ever will release, is always a question. So in today's video, we're looking at a game that's actually going to be releasing in a playable state next week, September 22nd, and that game is called Renown. So I've had a relationship with the developers of this game for the last few years. I was one of the first content creators brought in to test this game probably about 3 years ago when it was basically just a combat tech demo. And I've gone in there every 6 months, every year over the last several years to kind of test things out, see what the game state is, and play it. I also really love the developers. They're 4 guys who wanted to make their dream video game, and they've stuck to it for 5 to 6 years at this point with constant updates and slow but steady progress towards finally getting into this early access state. These guys were actually on my podcast probably about 2 years ago with the late great Soder Dave, and it was probably my favorite cast I've ever done. The guys are super engaging to talk to and very knowledgeable about the genre. So I definitely want to disclose the relationship I have with the developers, but I don't think there's going to be any bias in my video. I was definitely not paid to make this. It's just the genre I cover. So I was like, let's come out and make a video. So what I want to do in this video is first off, give you guys an overview of what the game's going to be like. What are the different systems in the game? What is the gameplay loop going to be? So that you can determine if it's an interest to you from there. And then I want to go into who I think is going to like this game, or basically if it's going to be worth your hard-earned money, because as with any game in this genre, not everyone is going to like it. So I'm going to try to tell you guys just what I feel of the current state of the game and my impressions from having played it a decent amount. So let's start with what Renown is, and at its core, I think the reason that a lot of people who follow my channel are going to be interested in it is because it is a medieval slasher game with combat that is inspired by the original Chivalry and Mordhau. So the combat's going to include all the elements we're used to in games of this genre. So you're going to have swing manipulation with your drags and excels. You're going to have morphed attacks where you can turn, say, a stab into a slash. And then you have attack canceling too, where you start an attack and then hit your input to cancel it, which hopefully causes a panicked parry from your enemy. And speaking of panicked parries, this game is going to have a timed block similar to Mordhau. So it's not just going to be you hold it down and can block forever like in Chivalry 2. It's going to be a timed block, but I will say it's going to be much more forgiving than it is in Mordhau. You have to miss a little bit more significantly than you do in Mordhau to not get the actual parry. So basic combat out of the way, what is the game going to play like? And it's not going to play like Chivalry 2 or Mordhau, which are basically just large-scale combat simulators, right? The battlefield of medieval times. It's going to be a little bit more complex of a game. I would actually say it's closer to a game like Rust with swords. So this is going to be a survival kind of crafting game or base building game that is best played in a group with friends. Similar to something like Ark Survival, you join a server of 50 to 100 players, right? And then you're thrust into the open world. You start with absolute nothing, and you go around and you chop down trees, you break rocks, you gather food, and slowly but surely you start to be able to craft basic items. This leads you to be able to craft better materials and basic buildings, and eventually you're able to craft up pretty insane and awesome armor and items. Now, the game has a tiered system where you're going to be starting to make clubs and just other complete trash-looking weapons, and eventually you're going to be able to make shorter swords, basic axes, all the way up until you get to the top tiers where you're clad in full plate armor using a Zweihander, a Messer, or a longsword, right? Just top of the tier medieval weapons. And this tier system kind of goes throughout the game in all aspects, from your base building, right? You're going to start building little stick huts with thatched roofs, but then eventually you're going to get enough stone that you can build pretty insane medieval bases and medieval castles. This game is also going to be persistent, so your defenses are going to be very important because while you're sleeping, someone can raid your base. Now, I'm not much of a builder or crafter in games, but the castles that people have been able to make in this game are absolutely insane. I believe there was a screenshot going around for a while. Someone actually made Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings in the game, so the tools are pretty expansive, and you can do some crazy things in it. And the world is relatively expansive. It's kind of open. You're going to have different biomes where you can go to get different types of materials. And you're also going to have points of interest on the map that house some of the better loot materials or gear that you can get in the game. Now, of course, you can go in there and you're going to have to fight NPCs of varying quality to get some of this stuff. But you might run into players who also want their loot also. And you might get into some PvP. This is very much a game that combines the survival PvE elements of something like Medieval Dynasty, where you're going around gathering items, building up your town, building up your base with your friends. But at any time in this world, you can run into other players, and they may or may not be hostile. And this is also a full loot game, so when you die, everything that you had on you is on your corpse. Your enemies can take it, they can decide they're going to use it, or they can just be a-holes and throw it in the bushes somewhere so you will never be able to find it again. I think what appeals to players about games like this is the fact that anything can happen at any time. The game will have voice in it from day one, so you can talk to the people you run into games. And I think this is where the real beauty of games like this happens. You can decide to forge an alliance with someone that you randomly meet. You can form an alliance with a party to take out a bigger group of players, and then at any point in time, you can break that alliance and kill each other and take each other's stuff. So there's a lot of great chances for player interactions and for everyone to get a different player experience, because you never can predict what humans are going to do. But now, when I played this game, my favorite aspect was when I would get in the big castle sieges with a lot of players, right? Two groups of players would kind of come together and form their own little teams, their little clans, whatever you want to call it, and you would fight out over territory. I think the real fun was when someone built up a pretty large, impressive base, right? And they put a lot of work into it, and you come along with battering rams and catapults, and you're able to destroy their base and take all their stuff and get them to start over from square one. Now, of course, this sucks when it happens to you, but I feel like when you have stakes, right, you have something to fight over, it really makes the adrenaline rush of the combat just hit a little bit different than a game where you just respawn and you're back in it. Now, for my people who are worried about getting ganked nonstop, yeah, that can happen 100%. It's definitely a game that is meant to be played with other people. There are safe zones in the game where you can go trade items, buy items, and just get a kind of a respite from running around, getting killed nonstop. But this is mainly a PvPvE game. You're going to have to take risks and go into the PvP zone if you want to accomplish anything in this game. So let's transition to, should you buy this game as an early access, and what can you expect from day one? And I think the answer is going to be a little bit different for everyone. So I'm going to try to give you as many impressions as I can to see if it's a game that's going to be good for you or something that you should wait on. For starters, I think anyone who's into the medieval slasher genre, or they're into survival games that have PvP and high stakes, will be interested in this game. I think if you're a fan of the adrenaline rush you get in a game like Dark and Darker or Escape from Tarkov, the full loot PvP is going to be very appealing to you. I also think that my people who like Chivalry or Mordhau, I think the combat is going to be a little addicting to you once you start to get into it and get into some dueling and some combat. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. But I want to be transparent because I've heard people talk about this game being a rival to Chivalry 2 or a rival to Mordhau, and I just want to be clear that combat-wise, it is not as good as either of those games. If you're expecting Mordhau level cleanness to the combat, you're not going to get it here. The animations are going to feel a little janky. It's going to sometimes feel a little bit clunky, but it does have that type of combat system that we know and love, but in a much, I guess, larger scale game. I always like to use Dark and Darker as my example of a game that I really loved and enjoyed, but I hated the combat. And I've said many times when I've talked about that game, if it had Renown's level combat, I would absolutely probably play nothing else. So I think Renown's combat is something that's better and feels more functional than Dark and Darker, but it's not going to feel as good as Chivalry 2 or Mordhau. I think if you're someone who's a creative, you're also going to really enjoy these games. I think at some point you're probably going to get custom user servers where you can take out the the PvP, and you can go in. I know they did have this stuff in the playtest where you could go in and you could just build whatever you want. If you're a creative, someone who comes from those survival games, the Rust, the Medieval Dynasties, even the Minecrafts, I know I have some Minecraft players watching. I think you might enjoy going into this game and building some pretty cool stuff. And I think that's another selling point here is that this stuff actually works. The building and the mechanics actually work where you can make some pretty epic things, right? Even though the game is in early access, the developers have been working on it for between 5 to 6 years. So there has been a lot of progress in the core mechanics of the game working. Even if they do need more polish, at least you can go in and you know that the game is going to work. But that being said, as an ambitious game made by 4 people and in an early access state, you should expect some bugs and jank from day one. You should also expect some server issues or some lag in the larger scale fights. I've played this game at times where I've been in 40 to 50 people fights with absolutely no problems, and then I've played this game at times where I've been in a big castle siege with 70 players and it barely functioned. So while the devs are working on the netcode and stuff, expect some variance in performance. And if you're someone who wants to have a completely polished AAA type experience, you're not going to get that from day one. So I hope my overview and what I've said about the state of the game gives you guys a little bit more insight if you wanna spend your hard-earned money. I know I will be playing the game pretty extensively when it comes out. I actually do have quite a few Steam keys. If I have anyone in the comments who's diehard to play the game, let me know. Maybe I'll give one or two out. As I said, I think hardcore fans of the genre will want to try this game and check out all of the systems and the fun that you can have in a full loot PvP environment with friends. I think that's really the game really shines when you're running around on voice, screaming at your enemies. They're screaming back and you're fighting and talking trash over, I mean, you could be fighting over a bunch of sticks, but it's well worth it. And it's a lot of fun when you have those interactions. But again, if you're someone who wants a fully fleshed out AAA type experience from day one, I don't think you're going to get that here, and probably the bugs and jank in the game are going to bother you. So I would say you probably should be passing if that's you, because I don't know if this game will ever feel like a AAA game. Alright guys, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe. Champ out.